There we go. Hey, you're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. For those who don't know, I'm Teddy. Randy is not here today. This is the second Wednesday of the month. And so Randy goes off and does Leadership Winston-Salem. Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy is really grateful for the Elder Law Firm being one of our sponsors. If you ever have a need for helping the older generation in your family, those who are, on the front side, and wanting to be serious about, asset protection, asset management, financial planning, as well as other elder law needs, reach out to the Elder Law Firm in Greensboro, North Carolina. I can promise you have a great conversation. They can help you with ideas that you haven't thought about. So, hey, today our special guest is John Chapman, but we have a substitute for Randy today. We always get this about at least once a month, satire happening here. We have someone who's vying for Randy's job, and today Terry is vying for Randy's job. So if she shows up 2 or 3 times, then I generally means that she's starting to throw me money to get this job. So, but anyway, Terry, thanks for covering for Randy today. I appreciate it. So
most certainly. Thanks for having me, Teddy.
Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience, let them know who you are.
Yeah, my name is Terry Cummings. Glad to be here today. I am the Vice President of Talent and Workforce at Greater Winston-Salem, Inc., formerly the Chamber of Commerce. A little bit about my background. I have 15 years in HR with a variety of roles, including operations, leadership, and workforce development. And I'm also an adjunct instructor at Forsyth Tech and Guilford Tech in the HR management program. So any HR, come to me. I'll help you out.
Yeah, so good stuff. So, and we met years ago, and we've done work with each other. So I love my Greater Winston-Salem folks, which for those who don't know, it used to be what most people refer to as the Winston-Salem Chamber of Commerce, but they've completely rebranded and doing things a little bigger than they did before. So for those who don't know me, I'm Teddy Burriss. I'm a LinkedIn strategist, trainer, and coach. I teach LinkedIn as a business tool. I also teach Google Workplace and Gmail as business tools. Love helping people figure out how to master those tools to be able to achieve more of their goals in business as well as in career. So, on Wednesdays, I show up, and my purpose is to help drive a conversation that can help others. And Randy and I have been doing this. This is, by the way, this is show. If you're on here, you want to take note, mark on your calendars that March 9th, you showed up for the 100th publishing of Lunch Conversations with Teddy and Randy and Teddy. So this is show number 100. 4 more shows, and we're going to hit complete our second year. So we're pretty excited about that. Our special guest today is John Chapman. John comes to us all the way from Greensboro, North Carolina. He's the co-founder of the North Carolina Sales Institute, which is, housed out of the Bryan School of Business at UNCG. John has spent a few years, notice the gray, as a high-level sales professional. And besides his collection of an undergrad degree from Uconn, he also has an MBA from Wake Forest, where he redeemed himself. John, would you hit your unmute button, dude, and introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Hey, everyone. My name is John Chapman. Yes, thanks, Teddy, for the long runway. I appreciate it. I spent 30 years in high-level sales and found my passion teaching young people the modality of sales, and it's a true passion of mine, and to help them get jobs in industry, and then do a side hustle where I work with companies on developing their sales strategy. I don't do sales training like overcoming objections. There's so many people do that, but how do you really structure a sales force to maximize your selling effort? It's companies, when they're growing, they hire salespeople and they say, go forth and multiply. And what I do is I just come in and help them formalize their sales process.
Yeah. How did you get, Terry, we'll grab that question in a minute when we get in a little deeper. I saw that question come up. So John, how did you get into this idea of creating the North Carolina Sales Institute? And then and I'm being a little satirical here, and then get the Bryan School to let you do it in their sandbox?
Oh my God. Well, that's a great question. I was doing some work in executive ed over at the Bryan School, and the head of the department, Jim Bowles, the head of the marketing department, said, they had one sales class, and would you like to teach it? It was, the sales management class.
Yeah.
And I'd love to teach it. So that was 7 or 8 years ago. And the first class I taught, I walked in, there was 19 souls in the class. And I asked each of the people, like, first of all, I told them this is the most important class you're ever going to take. And they, say everybody tells me that. And then the second question, I said, well, who wants to be in sales? Well, just imagine everybody just sitting there, nobody raising their hand. I said, so and I'm thinking, did you remember how I met my mother when he went in and taught this class? And he's about 15, 20 minutes into it, and he was in the wrong class. Well, I went right to this is the sales management class, right? And they said, yes, it is. I said, okay, good. Then I asked, well, who wants to be entrepreneurs? And about 90% of them raised their hands. And I said, well, great, then I'm in the right class. And they said, well, what do you mean? And I said, what do you need to be an entrepreneur? And they said, well, you need a business plan. I said, okay, I'll give you that. So what do you do with that business plan? We have to find investors. I said, what's that called? And they said, well, it's different. They knew I said, I said, no, it's not. I said, first of all, you have to sell yourself on the idea. Then you have to find partners to help you grow that business. And that's called sales. And I said, as an entrepreneur, you are selling all day long, 24/7. So I taught the first class. Jim Bowles, who was my partner in crime at the Institute, said, wow, you're pretty good at this. And I said, well, I did it for 30 years. And he said, what do you think about a whole sales program? And wrote a white paper along with Jim made it academic. I wrote it, as a sales guy would write it. And then we presented it to Dean Banks. Banks said, let's do it. So that's how we started it. Can't hear you, Teddy.
We have Diane and Natalia watching us on LinkedIn, and Natalia says sales is the most important skill for any profession.
Yeah, I mean, just think, elder law firm. What do you think they're doing all day? They're selling, So
yeah, absolutely. So, hey, this is good stuff, John. So let's go a little bit deeper here, and there's lots of ways to sell. I mean, there's lots of different people who sell, but let's talk about the sales role, the human who is a salesperson. Let's talk a little bit about the different types of sales roles that are out there.
Well, you brought up SDR and BD, and I'm going to break it down. There's many types of salespeople, but it gets down to hunters and farmers. Okay. The hunter's the one out there that goes and slays the dragon, and then the farmer, basically cuts the dragon up and feeds it to the flock. So, the hunter's the pioneer, not afraid to knock down doors. The farmer manages accounts once they've been slain. Yeah. And there's many different, there's some great, sales manager, chief revenue officer. I mean, customer relations specialist. They're all sales roles. Yeah. But most young people now, their jobs, they'll start off in inside sales as an SDR person, a sales development role. They call it SDRs, and then they'll move up through the ranks to outside sales, territory sales, sales leadership, account executive, and then you take the big step into sales management, sales leadership, and VP of sales. And
a farmer, if you're going to, and by the way, anybody who's in job search, anybody who's in career transition, you can call it whatever you want. You're a hunter. You are absolutely hunting for your next great conversation. And if you don't think it's sales, then you're not going about it the right way. What do you think about that statement, John?
Well, I just read Dean's little comment about being a talker. Dean, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And so you listen more than you talk.
Yeah.
And it's all about the curious questions.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that when I work with companies is you need to be totally prepared to go in front of that client. You don't just show up and not be prepared.
Yeah.
Because sales is a strategy. It's very strategic, and you have to go in there extremely prepared to ask very pointed questions to uncover their needs. Because many people say, I have no, I love the current supplier I have. Well, that's great. What makes them so good? And ask that question. And they did this and that, and I said that's great, and it just uncovers more questions. So, Dean, going back to your question, more listening than talking.
Yeah, and that applies to his other perspective. How do you become a good salesman without being pushy? And what you just said, what I heard you say is ask more relevant questions.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I call it being pleasantly persistent.
Yeah.
And in the sales call, what you're trying to get to is there a fit here or not? And if there's not a fit, then you just, you're not being pushy. You just say, Mr. Prospect, this is just not a good fit. And, I've enjoyed meeting you, but let's just move on down the road. So lose fast. That's one of my favorite sayings.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the way Sandler sales training taught me is go for the no as fast as you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go for the no. Yeah. And that's the same thing in job search as well as it is in business. You want to hear a no, so I can take, Greater Winston-Salem off the list. They don't want to hire me. Now I'll just go to Greensboro. Second, Terry, I'll go to them second, not first. So talk a little bit about those acronyms, because there's some big acronyms that people use in sales management. BD, business development. What does that mean to you?
They're all interchangeable, Teddy. They really are, sales development, an SDR, sales development, representative, business development representative. It really depends on the organization, what they mean.
Okay.
So when I refer to, the students that are graduating from our program are mostly going into inside sales, and they'll call it BD or
they'll call them SDRs.
SDRs. But as you move up through the food chain, there are many different accounts. Your goal is to become an outside salesperson where you're managing larger accounts, and then eventually get into leadership where you're actually managing salespeople, both in the field and inside sales as well.
Yeah. And every industry is a little bit different. There are some industries, John, that I've talked to people with who have said there are people in those industries and those organizations go, look, I could become a sales manager just like that. They want me to, but I like the space I'm in. I like the role I have today, and I don't want to mess it up.
Well, as a salesman, again, I went through, I ended up in sales management, and, now you have to manage people. That's a big difference. And, and I enjoyed it, but I also enjoyed my time as a, not a lone wolf, but, an individual contributor where my day was my day. As long as I was, bringing in the numbers, nobody bothered me. And you know what? If I wanted to take off and not be there on a Friday, nobody cared.
Yeah.
They just didn't. And as long as you're bringing home the bacon, nobody really cares. They don't want to mess with a good thing. But when like I said, when you get into management, then you have to manage salespeople at the end of the day. And the same thing applies. I never messed with the top performers.
Mm-hmm.
It was the ones that needed coaching and help, that that were struggling, that you had to spend more time with.
Yeah. A lot of sales leaders will say, let your top performers keep doing what they're doing. Focus on that mid-level because you can move that mid-level to the top.
Yeah, well, you just move 1 or 2 percentage points. It means a lot. So,
Yeah. So, good, cool. So, compensation. This is another big area that we run into when we talk about sales roles, sales position, is compensations. And a lot of people are fearful of one of the compensation styles that seems to be pretty popular. And I understand why, which is, commission based only. Talk a little bit about the different types of compensations, John, and your thoughts on the different levels.
okay, so commission based only. Now, I'll give you a great example. I had a young sales person get a job, and they paid him a base and a little bit of bonus.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal was to get him to straight commission. And he's like, well, how long do I have? And the president of the company said, as long as it takes to get you to straight commission. And then he realized, after a year and a half, he could make more money straight commission than he could on bonus. So the difference is straight commission, you eat what you kill.
Mm-hmm.
The harder you work, the more money you're going to make. There's no backup plan with a base salary. So large corporations usually have a base salary plus some type of incentive program. But if you sell a service like insurance, for example, you are straight commission. You eat what you kill.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah. And some organizations have what's called have the draw. They don't even just have a fixed base.
Yeah, it's same thing. It's basically it's a little runway to get you to straight commission.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, and they give you a draw for 6 months. Basically, it's so you won't starve until you build up your book of business, and you can go to straight commission.
Yeah.
And straight commission, Teddy, from a company standpoint, is especially a small company, is very good because it's a variable cost. Somebody sells something, then you got to pay that person. But if you had a salesperson with a base and a bonus, you got to pay that person every single month. So it's I always tell when I work with small companies, find independent contractors. These are folks that do this for a living. They get paid on commission, and they'll have a book of business. What I find with independent contractors, independent reps, is they know where the bodies are buried. Like they'll know the buyer at XYZ Corporation or in that industry. So they're really good at getting you the appointment at the right person. And then you as the sales manager have to go in and sell it.
Yeah. And that you just brought up a term, independent contractors or manufacturers reps. Talk a little bit about what that means and how that works.
Well, when I was in industry, I had both direct salespeople and independent reps in the same territory. This is crazy. Why do you have duplication? And the direct salesperson was managing a team of people in those territories. They did a lot of selling and servicing. The independent rep was very close to the headquarters of the buying organization. And it was the eyes and ears, and was always in those buying organizations all the time, with one line or another. Now, they wouldn't have competing lines. They would have complementary lines. Yeah. And so they were my eyes and ears in that account. They would tell me if there was a problem there before there was a problem.
Yeah, but speak a little bit about that lines part, because not everybody understands what a manufacturer's rep is. Manufacturer's rep, he'll sell paint, he'll sell paint brushes, he'll sell tape, he'll sell all the things that an organization needs to buy, but he won't sell 2 lines of tape. He won't sell 2 lines of paint. So, and it's just an interesting model. I know some individuals who are manufacturers reps who absolutely love what they do, because when they're sitting down talking to that guy, again, I'm using the analogy of talking to the guy about paint, he knows daggone well he needs paint brushes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's a win-win because you got one, what's it called? One throat to choke if you don't get the right stuff, you know, from the customer perspective, but from the, you know, salesperson perspective, he gets to go all over that organization to find out all the different things that are relevant that he has access to as a manufacturer's rep. So,
Yep.
it's an interesting model for people who are thinking about getting into sales. It gives you a much broader.
Yeah, and I say, you know, you become a rep. Let's say after you make after you cultivate some relationships in the industry. You can't just, I'm going to be an independent rep. You don't know anybody.
Yeah.
It's the old saying. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And
who knows you, trust and respects you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, that's interesting, John. I mean, you know, those of us who have, you know, particular types of work today, example, me as a LinkedIn strategist, I could walk into hundreds of organizations and go, hey, I no longer just sell LinkedIn training. I sell Microsoft training, Google training, Salesforce training, et cetera, et cetera. I got the whole kit and caboodle. I just got to go get the relationships with those organizations to be able to walk in there with, you know, with one business card with access to all the other things beyond what I just simply do.
That's right. That's right.
So you got me thinking. Note to Teddy.
Note to Teddy.
Maybe
have you read the book Green Light with Matthew McConaughey?
No, I don't.
I recommend. It's a great book.
Yeah,
Green Light.
Green Light.
He would go note to self. You know, after each lesson learned, note to self.
So Terry, any questions or anything coming up? Any thoughts you have?
We got some good questions, really correlating, you know, job searches with, you know, sales characteristics and some of the things John's mentioned. Dean has a good question. The last one he posted, he said, how do you deal with rejection in sales? John, how does that work?
Now, John, there's two answers. One's the right one and one's not.
Well, I had a guy screaming at me one time, and I was in his office, and I knew he was very religious because he had a crucifix on his wall, and he literally was screaming at me, and I said, "Do you believe in the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ?" And his face just, "I do," and he said, "I'm a child of God, just like you are." And he just said, "Listen, I'm having a bad day. It has nothing to do with you. And it mostly of the time has nothing to do with you. And you just can't take it personally, Dean, at the end of the day, you know? It's business. It's business, you know? You get rejected a lot. And you know what? It toughens your skin and just keep on moving on, you know? So,
Yeah, you can't, it's hard, but you do have to remember it's business. And it just so happens that the way or however they said no to you, what they're saying no to is what you're offering to them at this moment they don't have a need for.
I remember a guy said, "No, we're not doing it." I said, "Is that N-O or K-N-O-W?" And he thought that was funny. And you know, you got to just cut. You know, are you just having a bad day? I mean, that's what you ask them. And, you know, I'm just trying to do my job. And you know, if this is not a good fit, you're always trying to move it down the field. You know, I understand, Mr. Prospect, this is not a good time. But can I tell you a story about another prospect, very similar background? And what they're going to say is, yes, tell me a story. People love stories.
Yeah.
They're going to say no to a story. So tell them a story, because that's what I'm talking about, going in extremely prepared. Because you never know which way a sales call is going to go.
Or an interview.
For that matter of fact, if you're interviewing for a job, they'll ask you all kind of, you know, what's your, you know, if you were an animal, what would you be, you know? And so, I mean, that was one I heard one time, and I was like, wow.
I'll never forget the I got a few minutes before the bottom of the hour. John, I'll never forget the worst thing, maybe the worst thing that ever happened to me is in a sales call. So go knock on this door. I'm not going to tell you the name of the company because you know who it is. Go knock on this door to see this guy, and on the door it very clearly says no
solicitation.
And so I get it. I'm not here to solicit it. I'm here to introduce myself to the CEO. And so this guy goes, "Oh, come on in. That's different. That's different. Come on in." And we started walking through this huge plant, and I'm like, "Man, is the CEO's office all the way in the back?" Because we're jig-jagging through equipment and past cubicles, and we get all the way near the end of it. And I'm like, wow, the CEO has an office in the back of the warehouse. And the guy goes, "Come on, I'll introduce you to him." And he opens up this door that opens up into the backyard. And he says, "Come on out, man." And as he's slamming the door, he used a few curse words and said, "I told you, no soliciting." Bam. And he left me out in the back of the yard. Yeah, that's a no, and I took that as a no. So, but you never know as a salesperson what kind of activity or event.
Yeah, my nephew and I got in the steel business after we sold our business in 2008, and this guy has become a really good friend of mine up in Reedsville. But the first time I called this account, got a different person. And the guy was not very pleasant to me.
Yeah.
So I wrote down in my little, I kept little notes, and I'm going to call this guy back. But I ended up getting the owner the next time.
Yeah.
And the owner was a lot different because, I always started my conversation as, "Hey, I'm John, and this is the company I'm working for. And do you have any, do you use some of these, I would always ask, do you use some of these products? And if you do, maybe we can talk sometime." And that's not my sales call, but for the most part, the second time the guy goes, "Yeah, I do." So he says, "Tell me more." And I said, "Well, first of all, tell me about your business, because you really want to get them talking about their business, but you do want to sort of lead it with what you do, at the end of the day. But when I work with young people, they want to go right into the sales presentation right away."
Yeah.
And going
Same.
back to the show, How I Met My Mother, you may be selling shoes, and they don't need shoes, they need a tie. So at the end of the day, I got plenty of shoes. I need a tie. If you were the tie salesman, I'd buy ties from you.
Yeah.
But so really, you got to do the qualification piece.
And it's the same thing with in interviewing. The more you can get that owner, that business leader, that hiring manager to talk, then the more you can relate to what he's saying and show that person that you understand and can relate to it, the better off you're going to be.
Well, Teddy, this. I mean, you like let's say there's a company in Winston-Salem you really like, you'd like to talk to about a job opportunity. Who in that organization do you know?
Yeah.
Or who do you know that knows somebody in that organization?
Right.
It's even better.
Yeah.
Because a little warm introduction is better than sending a cover letter and a resume that never gets looked at.
Yeah, you get better at it, you'll learn that cold calling is no longer the primary way to get a good conversation.
Yeah.
Not that it's not important to do, but it's not the primary thing to do. And again, business, sales, or job search, too often we're cold calling and leading with our resume and leading with our brochures.
Yeah, because I teach students a thing called their elevator pitch.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say you walk on an elevator, and it's the CEO of the company you want to go to work for, and you introduce yourself, and what does the CEO say to you? "Tell me about yourself."
Yeah.
And so you have to have that 30-second elevator pitch, but then you turn that after you finish your elevator pitch. Tell me, Mr. CEO, how did you become the CEO of XYZ company? And trust me, you want to get them talking more than you're talking.
Right. Yeah.
That's in anything you do.
Yep. Hey, you're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. Randy's not here. Terry's filling in for Randy today. Our special guest is John Chapman, and we're appreciative of the elder law firm's support for our show. Who's important to you, and how do you plan to honor their responsibilities to them? these are things that are also important to the elder law firm. So reach out to the elder law firm in Greensboro, North Carolina, talk about real estate planning and other matters that are important to people as they age through their elder and have more elder care needs. Their number is 336-396-4551. John, this is important. I appreciate this conversation because too often we look at sales. A lot of people look at sales as a scary thing to do. A lot of people look at sales like, I could never be a salesman. Talk a little bit about the type of human that you think could make a good salesperson.
I think everybody's in sales.
Yeah.
So, Daniel Pink wrote the book To Sell Is Human. We were all selling. And I love to tell this story. When I was a freshman in college, I was a student athlete. And that first year, they only wanted me to take 12 credit hours instead of 15. So as a freshman, at the end of my freshman year, I was 6 credits behind. And it's like, no wonder why nobody ever graduates, And so I decided to go to summer school that summer. I needed a job, and I ended up working in the athletic department for a guy named Henry LaChapelle. And Henri was, just imagine, he was probably, I was just a kid, 17, 18 years old. He smoked Lucky Strike 32s, non-filter, wore this big floppy, straw hat, weather-beaten face, shirt, he wore a button-down shirt to work, believe it or not, short sleeve, but it was always open, sweat and stained and everything. So one day, old Henry, and I was an accounting major. That's what I was going to do. I was going to be in accounting. So one day, Henry goes, it was 8 o'clock in the morning. It was, blistery August day up in, I went to University of Connecticut. And Henry goes, I want you to grab a rake and some black bags from the back and throw them in the back of the pickup truck. I'm going to take you out to the soccer field. And I want you to, it's just been mowed, and I want you to rake it into piles, bag it, and I'm going to come back at 11:30 and pick you up for lunch. I said, fine. So we're driving out to the soccer field, and said to Henry, I said, Henry, are you from this area? And Henry goes, no, I'm actually from Quebec, Canada. And I said, well, how did you end up as the head of maintenance here at the University of Connecticut? And he said, well, in World War II, I joined, the Army, and I was wounded in France and ended up at Fort Devon in Massachusetts, where I met my future wife, who was a nurse, and happened to, live in Mansfield, which is the next town over. So I just I was fascinated with his story. So at about 11:30 that morning, he had realized he had raked the whole soccer field. I bagged for him while he raked, and he looked at me and he said, what are you studying? And I said, accounting, sir. And he said, you need to be in sales, as he threw the rake at me, because this is not what I had planned to do this morning. But he said, you got me talking about myself. And that's what you're trying to do in sales, is get them talk, be curious. I was fascinated with this story. I really was. And be fascinated. That's how you.
Dale Carnegie says, talk in terms of the other person's interest. He also says, get them talking about themselves and show that you are sincerely interested in it. That's what you just told me. Everything you just said stacked up to those statements.
I got Dean just said the only coach is Gino. Gino was not there when I was there. I'm as I said, a little seasoned.
Yeah. I mean, that's what sales is. Sales is showing people that you're truly interested in them, their problems, their challenges, and then you can relate to it.
Yeah, Zig Ziglar said, you help enough people reach their goals, you'll reach your goals. That's all salespeople do. I have a quote out there. I said, if you inspire others to do great things, you're called a leader. But if you inspire others to do great things using your product or service, You're called a salesperson. What's the difference? You're
Yeah.
just inspiring people to do to achieve their goals using your product or service.
And letting you be a part of that.
That's right.
Yeah, to whatever, I get you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I remember my very first sales job. Hey, anybody on here? We got 12,000 people listening to us on Zoom. Anybody on here, tell us, what was your first sales job? Love to hear some examples of what your first sales job was. I'll tell you a quick story. My first sales job, and John knows this because I've told him about it, was in 2005. I was preparing to go start my own business. And I knew that in order to be an entrepreneur, start my own business, I needed to know how to sell. And so back in those days, I was in the IT industry, and I won't name any names of any companies, but I reached out to a friend of mine and said, hey, if you know anybody who's looking to hire a salesperson, I'd love to have that conversation. And she said, you need to talk to my boss. So I went to talk to her boss, and I don't know why, but he started pitching me on why I should work for him. And I just listened to what he wanted to do. He laid out for me his entire business plan for a new division of the company. And he just kept pitching me on coming to work for him. By the way, he never asked me for a resume. He never asked me for a reference at all. And I'd never been a salesperson before. And he hired me. And when he hired me, I asked him this question, John, and I don't know how I got this smart. Maybe I read a book along the way, but I asked him one question. I said, tell me the one thing that you know, if I do it and I do enough of it and do it well enough, I'll be successful. And he came back and said this. He said, I want you to get the biggest list you can of targets. I want you to call as many people as you can and find ways to get into meetings with those people. He wanted me to cold call. And I understand the power of cold calling, and I've done my fair share of it. But he wanted me, I didn't want to be that person. That's not what I wanted to be. And so I knew that I had to go learn a different way to do it. And that's how I decided to become a subject matter expert and build my brand around me being a subject matter expert to the point where I don't need to call anymore. But that's a long journey.
It is. It is.
You what's the word? You gotta cut your teeth on all the rudimentary steps to be able to get to the point where you become a known commodity.
Yeah. At the end of the day, smiling and dialing, blocking and tackling, and and Dean brought up, handling rejection. I love to tell this story. I was one of my first sales job was in Atlanta, but I was in Valdosta, Georgia, on a Friday afternoon, heading north, and it was about I still had, it was about 3:00, and I was driving north, and Macon was coming up, Macon, Georgia. And I had an account in Macon, Georgia, and I could have just, pistol whipped it, saying I did stop to see this particular wholesaler in Macon. And because I wasn't going to get home till 5:30 if I just kept going, but I said, no, I'm going to go see this wholesaler. So I pulled in, and the guy saw me right away. We visited, a while, and so he asked me what I had that was new, and I showed him, and he said, "Do you got a few minutes while I write you a PO?" And I didn't leave there till 5:30, 6:00 that night. Didn't get home till 7:30, 8:00 at night. But
you got a contract.
I got the deal, baby, and because I made the sales call. Woody Allen says 80% of success is just showing up. So just keep showing up.
Yeah, I'm with you. Hey, let's talk a couple more points, and we could go on like this all day long. But another couple points. What are a few, and you touched on a few of them, what are a few philosophies a salesperson needs to have or adopt to be successful? And number one is show up. What's some other really good philosophies?
I love to read the Zig Ziglar books about motivation. On my wall, I have Muhammad Ali, if your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you think about any entrepreneur that's been successful, you just have to believe in Simon Sinek calls it your why.
Yeah.
And find your why,
Mm-hmm.
and then if the company you want to go to work for has similar whys, culture, work ethic, stuff like that, then that may be a good place for you to put down roots.
Yeah.
If you don't believe in what you're selling, you're not going to be successful. You really have to believe in it.
Yeah. I another one I throw in there, John, is that you have to know it's a journey. Nobody's gonna hand you a golden book of business. It's just not gonna happen.
I tell students, first class, always ask, who's special? And a couple of them will raise their hand. And I said, what makes you so special? Well, I completed high school and did really well. I got a 4.0 and I'm on the dean's list here. And I said, so do you think the people that went to Harvard, do you think they're special? Or Yale, or Dartmouth or wherever? And I said, nobody cares. Your parents care. Yeah, the parents will tell you you're special, but nobody cares. You have to care enough about yourself to go out there and do the blocking and tackling to move yourself along. And I, there's a great book. It's called, by Jeff Olstein.
I have the tools, John.
Yeah. Google Jeff Olstein for me.
Jeff Olstein's book, Sharing Hope.
No, Olsen. Olsen. Jeff Olsen.
Olsen.
Yeah. The Slight Edge. It's called The Slight Edge.
The Slight Edge. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the Slight Edge, all it talks about in the Slight Edge is doing the little things every single day that separate you from everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
For example, and I tell students, we have a sales organization at the Bryan School. If you show up, good things will happen. You don't show up, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so those students that take that advice have done well. They're working for AT&T now in Dallas or Google or MuleSoft because they had the Slight Edge. They did the work that no other student wanted to do. I love it. I just don't have the time. and I tell people you have all the time in the world.
Yeah.
You really do.
Yeah. Todd dropped into chat the analogy for the Slight Edge is doing that which others are not willing to do.
That's right.
And it's not so much that they can't do, they're not willing to do.
Well, yeah, he has a quote in there, and I may butcher it a little bit. He said, what's comfortable now will be uncomfortable later.
Yeah.
What's uncomfortable now will become comfortable later.
Yeah. Yeah.
So get comfortable now with the uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you get too comfortable, you're not being fair to yourself.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. So, you and I chatted about this a while ago, and I want to play this a little bit now. That is, how does a salesperson know that she or he has hit their stride?
And that it's you never hit your stride. Continuous learning.
Yeah.
I call it the 24-hour rule. Let's say you land a big account, celebrate for 24 hours, and then go back after it. Because it's the nature of the beast. I tell students there's two types of people in the world. There's dragon slayers and dragon pointers. There just is. You want to be a dragon slayer.
Yeah.
Not, oh, there's a dragon, You want to be a dragon slayer. You pull it out and go kill that dragon.
Yeah. A 3-year-old can point it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm with you. I would mind you, my boss won't let me celebrate for 24 hours. When I put that ink on that contract and hand it to her, she goes, "All right, go do more."
That's right.
Pretty quickly, go do more. And by the way, don't forget to take the trash out tonight. Or
Yeah.
bring the trash can back in the next morning. And but you know, you know that you have made it when it is not, like you said, when it's no longer difficult. What you used, and I love it.
Let me rephrase this, Teddy. If you enjoy what you're doing, then it's not work.
I get you. I get you.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the point. If you really enjoy what you do, it just, the universe has a habit of just putting things in front of you that just makes it worthwhile. But you have to put yourself out there every
You
single
do.
day.
And you've got to become a known resource, a known and trusted resource. And that's for me when I realized I hit my stride, when I was heading in the right direction and my flywheel was flying a little smoother. I needed to get it to move faster. But I realized I was hitting my stride when I discovered that I no longer had to prospect as hard as I used to prospect.
Yeah, that's a good. The universe just keeps providing for you. I call it the universe. Other people call it differently, but
I say call it life, God, karma, or the universe. You call it what you want, but when you're doing it right and it's working, then you need to keep doing more of what you're doing right.
Yep.
Yeah. So absolutely. And another thing that you mentioned this earlier, John, you said something to the effect of, when the more you're giving to people, you didn't use these words, these are my words, the more you're giving and the more people know that that they can trust you because you're giving to them and you're not selling to them, the easier it is to call that CEO up and say, "Can we talk?"
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been many sales calls where, my widget wasn't quite the right widget for them. And, but we became, business friends. I wouldn't say friends, but business, they trusted me.
Yeah.
And I'd get calls, "Hey, John, what do you think of XYZ company?" And I would give them my opinion. You're really a trusted advisor.
There's the words. Yeah.
You're really a trusted advisor, not a salesperson, but a trusted advisor. Yeah. I read somewhere where companies, do a lot of research now. It used to be let the buyer beware. Now it's more let the seller beware. So sellers need to provide insight and add value through insight versus selling a product or service, even though they may sell a product or service.
Yeah. And the more they trust and respect you, the easier it is for you to have those conversations about your products, your services. Yeah. Absolutely. And
people,
again, maybe they're not be ready. Go ahead.
Yeah. People will not do business with you unless they trust you. They may not like you, but they trust you.
Yeah.
You want them to like you, but it's about a trust thing.
Yeah, but you use that phrase and you were hesitant to call the people you do business with friends and use the phrase business friends. And I'm with you. I don't need to be friends with everybody I do business with, but I've discovered the more I got a brand new client, and he didn't know me from Adam's house cat until somebody told this guy to do business with Teddy. You need Teddy to do that project.
Right.
And this guy's like, "All right, man, give me your stinking quote," and blah, blah, the typical old, and, I kept treating him like a human, calling him by his first name, thanking him for his time, doing research on him and discovering what school we went to and who are some of the other people that he knows that I know. Like, "Hey, we'll call this guy, I'll call him Dean." And I say, "Hey, Dean, do you know John? I see you're connected to John on LinkedIn." "Oh my God, John's a drinking buddy of mine." I'm like, "Go figure, dude. He's a drinking buddy of mine." And the more where relevant and appropriate, the more you build that, Sandler calls it bonding and rapport. The more you build a relationship with that person you're trying to sell to, the easier it is for them to say yes.
Yep.
When they need it. Yeah. So now Terry Dean just said, how do you build trust? You send me cookies, dude. John, how do you build trust?
It's just having a conversation. That's all. 2 ears, 1 mouth, ask curious questions. It's, you're selling yourself before you're selling a product or service, Dean, at the end of the day, and just be empathetic. You know?
There's a word that sales leaders didn't use 20 years ago.
And yeah, do what you say you're going to do. That's, you know, if you say you're going to follow up on Tuesday at 4 o'clock or by 4 o'clock, you better do it. Or if you can't do it because you couldn't get information, let them know, you know. I used to call if I was going to be late to an appointment. Just wanted to let you know, I'm sitting here looking at a tractor trailer in front of me and I'm going to be late, you know. So.
Yeah, when I came to North Carolina, Richard Budd of what used to be called Budd Services, and now it's the Budd Group. Richard Budd's line to me when he hired me, he says, all I want you to do is do this, to help do what you say you were going to do. That was his line. I'll never forget that. I'm the youngest guy on the executive team. I'm sitting around all these executives, and he said, do what you say you're going to do. And
one of my Wake Forest classmates, John Larson's at the Budd Group now.
Yeah, I know John. Yeah. Good guy. So, hey, John, great chat. I mean, I wanted to have you on because I wanted to keep the dialogue going about sales professionals, because I think it's such an important life skill for people. And I know it aligns not only with everything we do in business and everything we do in career transition, but also in life. You know, I wouldn't be able to do all the things I do in life if I wasn't able to sell my wife on the ideas.
Yeah. I mean, I had an old boss that told me, great job today, John. Now let's go, both of us have to go home and sell,
Yeah. So, good stuff. Terry.
Yes.
Do you have a story?
I don't necessarily have a story, but I guess working in HR, so many things that John has mentioned really correlates to when I hear folks are job hunting and when they come in for interviews and that type of thing. And one thing he said at the beginning of the conversation that he did reiterate, you have to sell yourself on the idea. And I think, for job hunters, and I know Dean's had some good questions, how to correlate, the sales piece with interviewing and whatnot. You have to sell yourself on the idea that you're the person for the job. And if you don't go into an interview feeling that way and having that confidence, then that hiring manager is not going to feel it either. So I think building that confidence, preparation, knowing who you're talking to and knowing who you're interviewing with, knowing that company, all that, equates to the preparation. So, a lot of what John said just really, correlates with so many different things, especially that job search and interview piece.
Absolutely. Before we introduce our speaker for next week, I'll tell you a quick story for me. I was never a salesperson. I never sold anything in my life, for the most part. And I took that sales job in 2005, and I discovered a couple things that my network is important to me. And the more I build and respect and care for and empathetic to my network, the more it'll reciprocate to me. It became easier for me to get into new conversations the more I built a network of people and showed them that I cared about them, whatever that was and however it looked or however it was relevant. And I discovered I didn't need to be a salesperson. I just needed to be a connector. And John, you know this, the more you connect and the more you ask people to connect you and introduce you, the less it's like sales. It's just two dudes talking, or a dude and a lady, or two ladies talking, and it really discovered for me, again, I'll reiterate, my network became my most important asset. And to this day, it is my most important asset in life. Because that's how I got every conversation that I wanted to have and for business and family and et cetera, et cetera. So don't think of yourself as a salesperson. Know that you have sales goals, but think of yourself as someone who cares enough to get into the right conversations, and it becomes way easier than, what's it called? Spinning and dialing, smiling and dialing.
Smiling and dialing, baby.
Smiling and dialing. So, hey, next week, let me get my notes in front of me here. Next week, and I apologize for the messaging snafu this week, folks. I'll fix that. But next week, we have Cindy Gordon-Neer. Cindy is the president and CEO of the United Way of Forsyth County. She's been there since 2011. Cindy's going to come to us and she's going to talk with us from her perspective about the importance of community involvement in your career or business success. And I'm a big believer, John's a big believer, Terry's a big believer of community involvement. And Cindy's going to bring a conversation to us in that regards about community involvement and career success. So show up next Wednesday. Bring your ideas, bring your questions, invite others to join us. And because we promise lots of good content and lots of, good ideas. And we want to share that with everyone that we can. So again, you're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy every Wednesday, 11:55 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, thank you to the Elder Law Firm for their support of Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. If you know anybody else who you think would be interested in sponsoring this community show, please introduce Randy or I to them. If you know any other topic that you would like us to talk about, what we need from you, if you could, is to introduce us to the human with the conversation. Don't introduce us to the idea, introduce us to the human with the conversation, and then we can pull them in and find out they're going to be a great show for you. Todd, thanks for your note. John, buddy, good seeing you again. I owe you, man. I'm hoping I'm gonna come see you soon.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
I think the masks are finally coming off, and some normalcy.
Cool. Then I can come hang out with you and your students.
Yeah.
Terry, thanks for covering for Randy today. Go ahead and submit your application if you want to take his seat permanently, and we'll evaluate it.
I will do so. Thank you so much, Teddy. I appreciate it. And thank you, John.
Thank you, dear. And we will see everybody next week at 11:55 a.m. Take care.